Hello everybody. How are you today? It's Friday all day long. Not sure how long I'll be streaming today. But we'll go for a little bit. I'm just trimming off the edges from a piece of jelly plate, a jelly plate print. I'm going to do 2 of them just because one might work and one might not. It's good to have you here today. Hope you're doing okay. I myself am dealing with, I think, the after December stuff. And as a result, I'm not, just so you know, because it's only fair to tell you, I'm not in a great space. And so if you're here, it's for me to cheer you up or whatever. Hello, Braveheart. That might not happen. So, just saying. And anybody that's watching the recording later and goes, I might think I'm in a terrible space. You could be not entirely right, but sort of. Anyway, I need to go put the cat out. I will do that, and I will be right back. Okay, cat's out. So, what I thought we would do today, I'm going to work on this one. We'll see how it goes. We're going to do, or at least I'm going to start. I'm going to start on this with, I'm just going to use this. It's a black marker, okay? It's a thick black marker. And we're just going to do a design. And then I'm going to get something that's a big circle like this. And I'm going to add some circles here. And it looks like this is going to do some running or feathering out, and you know, that's just what it's going to be. And so I'm going to add a couple more of those, and maybe one here, and maybe one here. Okay, So what we're going to do, and this is just mindless stuff, and so what we're going to do then is, I think I'm going to use maybe some Sharpies. And maybe this Sharpie. And we're going to play with the concept of neurographic art. Because truly, that's what I need to do today. So hopefully you guys are up for it. If you're not, that is okay. That's 100% okay. So I'm going to start with this one. And the concept of neurographic art is to do just a design that runs off the page, so it begins and ends off the page. I don't know what I'll do with this sheet when I'm done, but I may do something. And I'm going to take all of these intersecting spaces, and this will take a while because there's a lot of them here, and I'm going to round them out. And this takes some time to do. And the other thing I'm going to do is to thicken, I'm going to go over the lines. Like so. So I'm going to do that, and so this could be one of those more like a ASMR, which I used to know what ASMR stood for, but I've forgotten. Could be more like one of those kind of streams where you just kind of watch and listen to the scratching of the marker. I'm going to kind of thicken the lines, making sure that I'm going to keep the shapes in the corners or the intersections, keeping those intersections rounded. And so if they decide, you know, sometimes when you adjust one line, then another line you know, it may scooch over and you may lose the rounding. So you just kind of have to do it and this is very loosely, I'm not explaining it well, but this is what I'm going to do. So we'll do part of this. I don't know if we'll get it all of these intersections and thickening lines done, but we're going to give it a try. But when you're doing this kind of thing, what it does is it keeps you in the moment, keeps your mind busy, also keeps your hands busy, hopefully. And you just work your way through it. If the lines aren't thick enough, like this one doesn't seem thick enough to me, then I'm going to come back. I'm just going to thicken it up again. Now, people will always ask you when you are doing something like this, always the question is, well, what are you going to do with it? You know what the answer is? I don't know. I might do something with it. I might do nothing with it. It may just be an exercise in staying present and staying with the design, with the process of keeping my hand moving, keeping my brain concentrating on something. And highly likely that I will cut off the edges of this. I may turn this into note cards. Hard to say. I do like to have the lines thick. So today, last night actually, I was able to get my hands on Blue, who is the cat, the last remaining outdoor cat that we have here. I was able to get my hands on him and bring him inside. And that's good because he's probably going to be needing to come inside tonight because we are getting a very, very, supposedly, unless it misses us and goes around, we're supposedly getting a really, really involved cold front, Arctic cold front, and ice and snow coming in. And I think it's supposed to start, I don't know if it starts at midnight tonight or if it starts at midnight tomorrow night. I don't really know. I've lost track of all of that. And so Mr. Blue, who is a beautiful black and white cat, short-haired cat, needs to come inside tonight because it's going to be frigidly cold. So I was really grateful that he let me get a hold of him today. We do have warming mats for the cats outside, 2 of them. And so that's helpful because I can turn those on, and they're also on one of the dog beds that we still have. And so that gets them off the floor, and so that helps, and they can, they can get warm, especially if they snuggle with each other. And but anyway, I was able to bring him in last night, and he was he was pretty freaked out about the whole thing for a little bit, and then he kind of calmed down. And I was able to hold him, and his eyes went from almost coal black to finally having a pupil and so I could see the color of his eye, the iris and the pupil finally were not one. Anyway, this morning I was able to get my hands on him again and bring him in again this morning. And his companion is Braveheart, the gray and white cat that I've shown on stream before. They came here as a pair. They are a bonded pair. And so Braveheart realized that Blue was in, and Braveheart was already in the house. And so he came over and got close to Blue and really helped him to calm down. And so I ended up with both of them on my lap, and both of them, even Blue, was purring like crazy. And so that was really a good sign that we'll be able to bring him in tonight. Anyway, so that was good. There's always something good to look at and remind you that that it's good. Okay, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I'm just taking this one section at a time and adjusting the lines and adjusting the sections and the intersections. And I guess you guys have figured out I'm not watching the chat today, so if anything's going on in the chat, it just will. Okay, so always adjusting, always looking, staying with the present moment. Sometimes that is a challenge for me. It's proving to be that right now. And so that's just the way it is. But working, not trying to work fast when you do this, trying to work methodically and slowly. It's a little bit like Zentangle in that it keeps you focused, this kind of art. And there's a whole philosophy behind it. You guys can look it up. It's neurographica or neurographic art, and there's all kinds of different takes on it at this point. Lots of people have changed it and added their own spin on it. Myself included. I'm sure this is not exactly what it was intended, how it was intended to be. But I'm doing what I like and what works for me. And you can spend a great long time doing the neurographic art. I need to find a piece of paper to put my hand on here. So I'm just going to put a piece of wax paper on here because since I'm using a Sharpie, sometimes Sharpie is a little unpredictable, but depending on what the base layer is that you're working over. And this is a jelly plate print of some kind. I don't know if I did it or if somebody did it and sent it to me. That's always possible because they just all go into one container. That is the jelly plate prints. And they wait for me until I can do something with them. I'm constantly looking back at the various sections and seeing and making sure that the intersections are rounded. You want all of the spaces. You don't want any sharp corners or edges. You want everything to be rounded and continuously moving. And if there's one that seems too square, then I just come in and I just round it out a little bit more, like that. Okay? This has a lot, as I said, this one has a lot of corners and a lot of sections. When you get into these little spaces like this in here, then you get to decide, do I want to use those and round those out and make those little sections? I mean, we'll try it. I don't think it's going to work, but we're going to try it. Sometimes it works. But often what happens when the section is too little, I mean, that one worked okay. But sometimes when the section is too little, you just end up blackening it in because it's too little. That one looks like it's going to work. Okay, so we'll keep going here, and bit by bit, we'll deal with each one individually. The thing you got to watch too is this is just a piece of probably 20-pound copy paper. If you have anything under it on your mat or your table or the surface that you're working on, it's going to bump your pen and it'll make a jog in the smoothness of your line. So you want to kind of check your surface and make sure that you've gotten that you're not going over, something that's stuck on your mat or just some kind of crud that's under there. Okay, now like this little space down here, that's pointless, so we're going to ignore that right now. We're just going to thicken that up. So just because you've drawn a certain thing doesn't mean that you can't adjust it. So that's what we're going to do. That's what I'm going to do. Anybody can do this. Even if your hand is not real steady, you can still do it, because who says that your lines have to be 100% smooth and filled in perfectly? Nobody. So you don't have to do that. Okay, so we're going to keep going here. If you have any questions about neurographic art, I would get out your Google, get Dr. Google on board and ask Dr. Google, what is this neurographic art thing? And I'm sure you will find all kinds of websites and videos and all kinds of things. I don't know if there are any books about it yet. Probably are. I find it fascinating. I've listened to and watched lots of videos over the last several years. And you can just truly make it, you can make it fit whatever your interest is in this style of doodling, art, whatever you want to call it. Okay? All right, I'm going to keep working. So, and no matter how much you do and how careful you are, most of the time you will miss at least one or two places, and then you have to go back and kind of fill them in, adjust it, whatever you like. And if you have great big spaces like here, this is a big space. If I wanted to, I could easily add another, take another shape, circular shape or what have you, and let it intersect something and let it run off the page, and then you can take that so that divides that space up a little bit more. But every time you do that, you've added more corners that you need to go back then and round out. So because of the style of art that it is, it forces your attention to be on what you're doing and not on what perhaps your brain is trying to make you focus on. So it's a very good exercise, and I should not have this under. You shouldn't have things under your piece of paper, only over the piece of paper if you want to control where your hand is laying. So every time, remember, every time you add a shape or add another line, see, I added that circle that's created this corner here, so I'm going to round that out. And then try to smooth the jaggedy bits that I may create with my pen. I try to smooth those out. Alright, so we got another one here. So your eye will get to where you see those pretty easily, but sometimes you still miss them. Like this one. This would be an easy one for me to miss right here. So you just simply add to the rounding out. Okay, so do you see what a big difference, how differently this part of the sheet looks than this? And it's the same thing, the same doodle, it's the same continuous line, but very different in the way this looks and the level of comfort that I feel looking at this, because it's smooth, it's rounded. I just find that comfortable to look at, as opposed to this, which just is like, that's a big scrambled mess. Okay? Big scrambled mess. So let's keep working over here. And we've got some little spaces in here. We'll see what happens. You just have to take them space by space. And as I said, everybody has their own take on how they do this. And sometimes, you know, like this, I don't like how this looks right now. I'll deal with it in a minute. So I'm going to keep working over here with this little space. But it's one section at a time. And you can decide as you work on something like this how thick those black areas are, and I wouldn't get too excited about how they look at the moment, because one of the fun things to do with this, after you get the black part done, then you can start adding to these spaces in here. You can do those with a variety of materials like watercolor or markers or colored pencils, or nothing. You could leave them just the way they are. And then you can come back and decide if you want to put embellishment within the black spaces, the black lines. So, all right, let's see if this little piece, if this is going to be doable. Can always drop down to a smaller marker. This is a Sharpie fine point, which is not a fine point, but that's how it's marketed and labeled. It is actually quite a fat point. Okay, so that worked out okay so far. So far, so good. All right, let's keep going over here. And this is how I do these. I just work around. I'll jump around from side to side, from section to section, because sometimes I'm like, I'm tired of working over there and that, especially if it's real intricate like this is. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to work in that anymore. I'm just going to move over here. I'm tired of thinking about that thing. And the I don't want to say science behind it, because I don't know how much science there is in it. But the philosophy, we'll call it that. The philosophy behind this is, and Zentangle is the same way, and so is creating mandalas. That as your hand is moving, and as you might have some sort of situation you're thinking about that has you puzzled or confused, or any other number of descriptors that we could add to it, sometimes just by the act of moving your hand, and I did find this when I was doing so many mandalas, by moving your hand and doing repetitive strokes, or coloring in, or drawing, or shaping things, like rounding the corners, that sometimes it's amazing what what will pop into your mind as an idea or a solution. And so if you have a piece of paper close by, when you're doing this kind of stuff, oftentimes as things show up in your thought process, if you'll take a moment and write them, just jot them down, you could be surprised as to where that train of thought leads you. Okay, so we're going to work over here a little bit. And this is exactly how I do this. Just a little here, a little there. Some other people might be very methodical in the way they do it, starting at one corner and working all the way to the other corner. Or starting in the middle and working, in concentric, like a concentric circle type method. Totally no right, no wrong, in my opinion. Now, I don't know, the Neurographica gurus might argue with me about that. I don't really know, and I don't care. So there's that. It's like there are some people that think there are very specific ways to draw mandalas, and I suppose that could be true. I, however, depends on whether I'm drawing one that is using a compass to divide it up to start with, or using doing a spontaneous sort of mandala. Sometimes most of the time actually, I just go with whatever strikes me in the moment. And that's kind of how I'm approaching this. And it's interesting to see what shapes evolve. And when you're just working section by section, you may even see things in the shapes. You might see faces. You might see I don't know, mountains, clouds. You might see an animal. So that's another thing that could be quite fun to do this kind of thing and see, just see what kinds of things arise in the shapes that you're like, well, I didn't know that was there. I couldn't draw that. I couldn't draw that if I tried to, you know? But because you just did it spontaneously, it's surprising what can show up. Okay, so I'm going to work on this little space right here. So every time you have a sharp corner that shows up, and sometimes just by making one line or one intersection that you're rounding out, you'll find that another corner, sharp corner, square corner, whatever you want to call it, angular space, angular corner shows up, and you've got to round that out. So one of the things that this does is hold your attention. So if your brain is going off on its own crazy path, which we're all prone to do, this can be one of those aids that can help keep you focusing so that you're not allowing your brain to take over and take you off on a tangent. Some people do this black pen work with micron pigment pens or pigment micron pens. Sometimes people use paint pens and do it with paint pens. My attitude is do what works, do what you like, how about use what you have? That's the other thing. Sharpies are fairly inexpensive, and so I sometimes really, really like using a Sharpie just because they're not very expensive. You can cover, especially with this one, which is the fine point, you can cover quite a bit of territory with it. The one thing that Sharpies are bad about, though, and many markers are like this, if this base was a solid acrylic paint, sometimes your Sharpies they will clog up and go, nope, I'm not writing over acrylic paint. So if that happens, that can be an issue. Okay, right here, this is a weird space right in here. And so I may want to, because it starts here, it goes all the way over there. So I may want to just divide that up, which is what I think I'm going to do. So I'm just going to take this line and I'm just going to add that. line right here. And when a Sharpie dies, and it could have been a Sharpie that you just opened up, when the Sharpie dies, I don't know of anything that resurrects it personally. So when that happens, I'm just like, bid it adieu and let it go. Okay. All right. That's a little more comfortable to me than having that long, weird shape. And so I'm going to move on and finish the rest of this shape, which was one long shape there that kind of meandered about, but it wasn't comfortable to me, and so I added another line. So if that's where you are and you need to add another line, I don't know what they say about that. I don't know if the neurographic people tell you that that's not a good idea. I don't know. Doesn't make any difference to me. So there you go. Okay. So space by space, section by section. There's no rights, no wrongs, in my opinion. And you just keep working your way around, and I think we will get this whole thing done in a fairly short period of time, which I am surprised that I got it done, that we're going to get this done as quickly as we did. That's because I'm not stopping and looking at the chat. And hopefully everything's okay in the chat, but if it's not, we'll always wish it had been, huh? Okay, so we're going to come down here, and then I like to round these sections. When they're going off the page, I kind of like to round those off a little bit rather than just let them just end up, you know, a real square blunt stopping place. I like them to have a little shape, because then if I can cut this whole thing into, let's say, card fronts or note card fronts, that way I can use it all the way to the edge comfortably. You can always add more to it later also. Okay, so let's come up here. We've got this little teeny space here. However, it wasn't as little as one of those other ones over there. So that worked out okay. And then we got this one. And sometimes if you're not paying attention, you'll set your pen down and it'll make a mark. And so then you have to deal with the mark that you accidentally made. Or if you have a cat jump up on your desk, and Chance was famous for that. He would jump up on the desk and just come from nowhere. Seemingly nowhere. I mean, he was somewhere, but I wouldn't be aware of where he was, and so there he would come. More than once he jumped into a palette of paint, and that was always lovely when he took little paw prints around. Most of the time, by the time I had them, I wasn't using oil paint. I have had cats get into oil paint before. That is a real trick when they do that. But he did more than once. Got into acrylic paint and took his little cat prints, because of course I would react because he would scare me, so then that would scare him, and so then he would take off, and so now you've got this little trail of acrylic footprints that you have got to quickly clean up. Not going to hurt the cat so much, but whatever acrylic paint dries on sometimes is a little challenging to get cleaned off of surfaces, you know, especially like wood surfaces. That's not good. Okay, and let's just keep going here. I will stop and look at the chat when I get the black lines done. So if you're dying to ask me a question, wait just a little bit longer and put it in all caps in the chat here in probably about another 5 minutes. Sometimes your black paint markers and stuff, if you use those when you're doing this kind of thing, they will splatter. Depends on which kind of paint marker. Sometimes they will splatter and make a mess. And so you kind of have to realize that, you know, if that happens, you may have to make adjustments. It's the old make lemonade out of lemons. So if you get paint splatters or ink splatters where you didn't want them, then you got to make something out of it. Or cut off that piece of the paper. You can always do that too. You can edit your work. Okay, so we don't have too much left to finish up right in here. And then we'll take a look at it and see what corners we've missed. And you can always add more lines. That is the other thing. So if I wanted to break this space up more up here, I could add another line coming in. I think it's more comfortable to have curved lines. But you can always do that. You can always add more lines, and you can break up spaces even more. But just remember that every time you add a line, you're going to add more angles that need to be smoothed, more line intersections that need to be smoothed out. So just be aware of that. And you will wear down the tips of your felt tip markers. So when that happens, the thing to do, even though your marker may have more ink left in it, what you want to do is just thank it for its service and chuck it and start with a new one, because there's just not much you can do. Once the tip has gone blunt, really blunt, or really hairy on the end, You just kind of have to give it up, and that's why you buy, if you like Sharpies and you like using them, then buy them in a pack of at least 6. And that way you've always got one, a fresh one. Okay, so I need to just stop and look at this for a minute and see what spaces I may have missed. Sometimes what helps is if you look in like this in the computer monitor, or if you take a picture, like a photograph with your phone. Sometimes that's where you can really see where you need to round something out a little bit more. Okay, let's look. And I think that, honestly, the neurographic art is really quite pretty if it's left just like this, but there's always some good things you can do with it. So I've just added another line. This Sharpie is beginning to get at the end of its service. We're going to see if we can manage to make it go to the end of this black line exercise here. And by adding that extra line, that to me is more comfortable because it just helps to break up that large space there. So that's more comfortable for my eyes to look at. So I'm just going to break this one up just a little bit. Then look for the intersections that need a little rounding. Sharpies are solvent based, and so if you are prone to breathing issues, you might want to make sure that you're in a space that's well ventilated if you're going to use a Sharpie. Okay, so I think we might just let it go at that. Okay, let's see. Do we see any other any intersections? You can always add, you can always round out the corners later if you need to. But at the moment, I'm not seeing any that need to be rounded out. Okay. All right. What I'm going to do now is, I think that we're just going to, for the moment, because it's on my desk, I think, let's see, is this what I want to do? I think I'm just, because they're on my desk, I'm just going to use Prismacolors, okay? So I'm just going to use those, because that's on my desk. I was debating about whether I wanted to use the Inktense pencils and so forth, but I think I'm just going to use these, because this is just cheap copy paper. So I'm going to use the pinky red tones and the purpley tones, and I don't know, I'm drawn to the blues, and then maybe we'll use a couple of oranges. And we'll just see what happens, okay? We will just see what happens, because I don't really know. Okay, let's see. We have pumpkin orange and orange, and this is orange, so we don't need two of those. And this is Spanish orange, I think. I can't read it. And so we'll work with those, okay? Okay. And I'm just going to take the rubber bands off of these. I tend to rubber band the color families together that I like. Not everybody puts them together the same way I do, and that's okay. We're all different. We all organize things differently. Okay, so there is the color palette at the moment, randomly selected from what was on my desk. And so let's take, let's just start with this. This is pink. And let's just find a spot that we want to use. And I'm going to work within the spaces here at this point. So that's what I'm going to do. And I may use this piece of wax paper here to have something to lay my hand on, so that I don't transfer oil from my hand onto the surface. Okay, so let's just, I'm not going to put a lot of pressure. I'm just going in a circular motion. And I'm going to just lay down, not a heavy coat, but maybe a smoothish coat of pink on here in this section. And then I might go to, let's try mulberry. And I'm just going to do little circles of mulberry around the outer edge here of this shape. I'm just only thinking about this one shape. Now you can use any number of things you could use crayons. You could do whatever you want to here. Okay, so but this is just what's striking my fancy at the moment. And then I'm going to come back with the pink. And where that mulberry, which is kind of a purpley, red purple, where that mulberry ends, I'm just going to take the pink and I'm just going to blend again, I'm not going a lot of pressure because these are wax-based. Prismacolor is a waxed-based pencil. And if you go too hard with your pencil, you will lay down enough wax that you can't put any more pigment on it. So I'm just going to do this. So this color was, I think this is Spanish orange, just putting that in just to see what it would do. And you really can't see it a whole lot. I'm going to go back to the mulberry, and I'm going to go a little bit more mulberry around the very edge. Not as much, not as thick a section as I put on the first time. Like so. Okay? Because what I'm just trying to do is to add some shading and depth to that. And then I don't know if this is going to work. This could totally wreck the whole thing. But I'm going to try it. So this is a blending stump. And I'm going to use not the black end, but the other end, which is still relatively clean. And a little bit of odorless paint thinner, which is not truly odorless. And I've just dipped the tip of the blending stump in that. So there's a sponge in here. There's odorless paint thinner in here. And there's a sponge. And so I can touch the sponge with the tip of my blending stump. And that odorless paint thinner then kind of melts that wax and lets you blend those colors together a little bit more. I just want to see if it'll work. If it doesn't work, then we'll find out real quick whether we want to continue with this technique or not. It looks like it's working. So I'm going to go over this whole section because I went over the whole thing with pink to begin with, and so I just want to blend those, see if I can kind of blend those colors together. So that's what I did. So what I'm after, the concept is still letting the paper show up, the texture of the paper, which is from the jelly plate, letting that show up, and yet taking that section and adding some dimension to it. So it looks more like a little bubble. Okay, let's, just for grins and giggles, let's take this color, which is orange, and let's do something similar to this fairly big section. So, not a lot of pressure, just adding a coat of color, staying away from the black as much. I'm going to get up next to the black, but I'm hoping not to deposit color on top of the black. And so I'm going to do that all the way around, putting a coat of this orange on there, but not, I don't want to obscure what's below it. I'm going to leave that texture, visual texture from below. And then I'm going to go to, let's see, what other color could I use? Okay, this color is raspberry. So let's add a little bit of raspberry around the edges, like I did with the mulberry a minute ago. The main thing with a wax-based pencil or an oil-based pencil, doesn't matter which, is you've got to keep the pressure with the pencil, you've got to keep it very light. So what you don't want to do is to go like that. You want to go like this. This is what I'm doing, not that. Okay? Okay, so it's about 1/4 of an inch of color coming in from the edge, and I'm going to go back to the same color I used, so that was orange, and I'm going to blend where those colors, where the edge of the raspberry was, I'm going to blend that with the orange. The orange is the base coat to start with, and so then I am blending that over that kind of stripe, shall we say, of raspberry. Okay, then I noticed a couple spots where I didn't have the color down, so I'm going to come back and add that a little bit. And then I might take this color, which is this a Spanish orange? I wish I could see this easily. No, this is salmon. Rose salmon. And so I'm going to put a little bit of this, because it's nice and light, in the middle of this. Okay? So those are the 3 colors I used. There's the lightest one. I used a light one, a middle one, and a dark one. Kind of in the same color, sort of. Alright, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to get my odorless paint thinner and my blending stump. And I'm going to start in the middle here where it's the lightest color that I added. And then I'm going to blend that raspberry and orange together. And as the paint thinner dries out, evaporates more appropriately, the paint thinner completely evaporates out. And as it does that, you'll leave behind the texture, the visual texture from the print down here is showing up. It evaporates off of the blending stump pretty rapidly. That's why you have to keep re-moistening the tip of the stump. I like the blending stumps much better than the tortillons, which are the rolled paper blenders. I like these much better, personally. Okay, and so I'm going to call that good. You can spend as much time doing this as you want. I'm going to call that good. And I might just kind of dab off the end of the blending stump just so I kind of get the excess color off of it. And then let's do one in this kind of blue family, just because, okay? Just because. So let's use, let's go to this one right here, this shape, because it's a nice big shape. This color is cerulean blue. Yeah, this is cerulean blue. Okay. You might wonder why this pencil is sharpened at both ends. It's because I was an idiot the first time and sharpened it where the name of the color is. So I went back and sharpened the other end. But the good news is, well, now I have a double-ended pencil. But when I sharpen it away from the color number and name. To be honest, I rarely sharpen my pencils. I don't use them in a way that I need a lot of sharp points. Depends on the kind of artwork that you do as to whether you need a sharp point. I don't need that for the most part, so I rarely sharpen the pencils. Some people are sharpening them frequently, but that has to do with the kind of work, the kind of art that they do. Okay, so a light coat of cerulean blue. We're going to put those out of the way. So that's the one I'm using. And now I'm going to use this one, which is Copenhagen blue. This is a very powerful color. So I'm going to keep it pretty, a pretty thin area that I'm adding around the edges, so it's darker than the cerulean blue. But Copenhagen blue tends to be really powerful, so it can take over pretty fast. Again, not depositing a lot of pigment. Circular motion, light pressure, but you can see the color as it's, you can see from where you are. And I'm zoomed out pretty far so that you can actually get a good visual of that. And this is light aqua. So I'm going to put a little bit of light aqua in the middle of this. Okay, like so. All right, those are the three colors I've used: light aqua and light cerulean or cerulean blue. So they went like, it doesn't really matter. These two are pretty light, and then Copenhagen blue. So those were the colors I used, just because that's what I picked up. Okay, then we're going to go back to the odorless paint thinner. Now, if you had all kinds of blending stumps, then you might want to keep one for cool colors and one for warm colors. You know, I'm not really caring about that, so I'm just using one stump for everything. But I'm going to keep my color palette, hopefully. I don't know, at this moment I'm going to keep the color palette to just these three colors. That's my intention at the moment. Will that carry on till this is completed? I don't know. That's hard to say. Because sometimes what happens is when I get started doing something, I go, yeah, I just need that one more. I just need one more color. So I bring in a set of greens or a set of yellows or something, you know? All right, but you can see the difference now in the blending in here versus this part that's not blended. Okay. Again, odorless paint thinner is not fume free, so I'm working with a couple of fumey products here today. Sharpie markers are solvent based, and odorless paint thinner, which still has fumes, so you want to be sure that you have ventilation. I do have a fan going in my room blowing all the time. That is standard operating procedure. I also have a ceiling fan in this room, but the ceiling fan is not on, because the ceiling fan tends to cause more issues than it solves. The other fan is about a foot off the floor. It's one of those oscillating fans, and I have it running all the time in the studio room, because I need to keep the computer cool, and also just for my own health and safety when I'm doing stuff like this. Okay? And you just work your way around. The bigger the shape, obviously, the longer. I mean, this is one of those duh Barb moments, but the longer it's going to take you to get around. That's just, as my son used to say, that's the how of it. The blending stump, when you touch the sponge has absorbed the paint thinner, and then the paper stump, when you touch it to the sponge, just sucks that paint thinner right up into the blending stump. And it just kind of melts the wax that's in the pencil, just kind of melts it so that it blends into the paper. It's kind of magic, actually. If you decided that you wanted to add more colored pencil to this, you need to let that thinner completely evaporate out of your paper. And that may take a little bit for that to happen. Let it completely evaporate out, and then you can come back in. You could add a little bit more pencil, and then you could blend it out again with your blending stump. Okay? So there are the 3 colorways that I've added at this point. Would not have to keep only 3 colorways, but at this moment that's what I'm doing. Okay? So you want to make sure also that, I mean, I don't have much, I have very little, I don't know how to show you. I have very little paint thinner in there. But when it's not being used, put the lid on it. Yeah, put the lid on it. Okay, so the way that I would finish this up, because I'm probably going to take off here pretty quickly, is I'm going to use some white Posca pens, because that's what I have. Again, it's what I've got here on the desk. And so what I'm going to do, let's try this one first. Give it a good shake. Get yourself a piece of paper to make sure that it is working. Okay, so it looks like it's working okay. We'll find out here in a second. And then I'm going to go in between these over the black lines, and I'm just going to add some dots, and I'm going to see what it looks like. When it dries out, because sometimes Posca pen does funny things, interacts with the surface that it is going over. It may interact strangely, and you may end up with some where it may change color, and I don't necessarily want it to change color. So I may look at that and see what it does. So that is a kind of a medium point bullet tip. This one is a much fatter one. And so it will make a different size dot. And if you put the tiniest bit of pressure on it, you can get an even larger dot. So I may play back and forth between these two white markers, and I have another one that is tiny. This one is a bullet tip, but it is a very tiny bullet tip. And this one, if you draw with it, will spit. And so you have to be careful that you don't, unless you don't mind if it spits. If you don't mind if it spits, then you're in good shape. Okay, so let's go on. It looks like the white's going to do okay, so. You don't have to just use dots. You can use dashes. You can do all different kinds of things. I tend to like the use of bouncing back and forth between black and white. You could also draw patterns, or you could add dots, or you could do all kinds of things on top of the colored pencil sections. You are going to have to use a paint pen, because I don't think a gel pen is going to work for you to do that. It might, but I'm a little doubtful, a little skeptical of that. Okay, we got a teensy little black space here, so we might have to drop down to this tiny one. Okay, and once I get out of the tiny area, I'll go back to the bigger bullet tip. But it is helpful if you have a variety of tip sizes. I mean, I ordered an assortment of white paint pens from Amazon some time ago, so that I had all the different tip sizes, or a bunch of them anyway, so that I could do the kind of dot work that I like to do. Okay, so there's that. So that is pretty much the concept of neurographic art, or neurographica. That's the concept. So you start with basically what amounts to a scribble, and you scribble. Don't scribble too. Keep the sections kind of big-ish, so that when you come back and you do round out the corners, you want compartments, you want sections, but you don't want so many and so tiny that they're really hard to fill in. Round all the corners, and I used just a fine point Sharpie is what I used, and once I was happy with it and I think I've got all the corners rounded out, then I went back using a selection of Prismacolor pencils is what I chose to use, but you could use something else, and a blending stump, which is one of these. It's a compressed paper product. They're not expensive, but you do have to either order them or get them at a craft store in the art section. And then I used odorless paint thinner to go over it with the blending stump to blend those colored pencils together and kind of melt the wax and kind of make them a little more cohesive. And then on top of that, on top of the black lines, just using white Posca pens. You could use other colors too. You don't have to just use white. I mean, I have a whole assortment of Posca pens in here. I have gold ones, silver ones, and other colors as well. They come in metallic as well as the flat colors. And so you could go into that and you can then decorate your black lines if you want. That's totally optional. There's nothing wrong with leaving the lines totally black too. Okay? Okay, that's going to be it for me today. I hope to be back on Monday evening at 7 Eastern. That's the plan. And until then, I hope you have a great creative weekend. I hope you don't freeze, and I hope you don't get too much snow and ice where you live. So until I see you again, remember to get creative today, because you know it is easy. I just showed you. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.